This is an NBC News special report. Here's Lester Holt.
NBC News has learned that Stephen Breyer will step down as a justice on the U.S. Supreme Court at the end of his current term. That's according to sources close to the justice. The 80th is the oldest justice on the conservative 6-3 court. He's also the most senior member of its liberal wing, appointed by President Bill Clinton and has served since 1994. In the past year, progressive activists and some Democratic members of Congress have called upon Breyer to resign to make way for a new Biden nominee while Democrats control the Senate. We want to go right now to Justice correspondent Pete Williams, who's breaking this news for us. Pete, what do you know?
Well, according to people who are familiar with the justice's thinking, and we should clarify, we have not heard from Justice Breyer directly, but according to people that he has talked to, he's made this decision within the past couple of weeks to step down and has told the White House they're fully prepared now to take the next steps that will follow. And as you said, Lester, he has been repeatedly urged during the past term to step down while Democrats control both the White House and the Senate so that his nominee can be confirmed while the Democrats are still in control to maintain the current 6-3 split on the court, 6 conservatives to 3 liberals. And that's what his retirement would do. Now, according to the people we have talked to, several officials who are familiar with his thinking, his intention is to retire at the end of this term. Sometimes when justices step down, they say they will retire at the point where their successor is confirmed. But apparently what Justice Breyer has decided to do, according to people who are familiar with his thinking, is that he would step down at the end of this contentious term, which of course will be dominated by the issue of abortion, with the question of Roe v. Wade very much before the court, gun rights, religious freedom, and many other hot-button issues in this current term. So it will still be a barn burner of a term for the justice. 28 years on the Supreme Court as one of the court's dependable liberal votes, although he sometimes votes with the conservatives when it comes to issues of administrative law in which he's an expert. He's a former federal appeals court judge, served in Boston, originally born in San Francisco. And President Biden, Lester, has said that he is committed to nominating a black woman to the Supreme Court. And among the possible nominees, the names that have been thrown around are Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, who is a former Breyer law clerk and is a federal judge here in Washington, and Leonda Kruger, who is a justice on the California State Supreme Court. As you noted, he came to the Supreme Court in 1994. He's been 28 years on the court. And there was lots of speculation that he would step down at the end of last term. He said he would not, that he wanted to stay on the court, that he was concerned that in that environment, if he were to step down, it would make the court appear to be too political. And apparently he's made a decision now that enough time has passed that it won't be perceived that way. So we expect that an official announcement will come within the next day or so, Lester, and that then the process will begin of trying to find someone to succeed him.
Pete, I want to clarify this timing a little bit. You say the end of the term. When I think of the end of the term, I think of October. But of course, the court usually takes a break in the early summer. So do we have I guess the point being the midterm elections loom large here.
Well, yes, you're right. As a formalistic matter, one Supreme Court term doesn't end until the next one begins, and the new ones always begin the first Monday in October. But as a functional matter, the term really ends in June. And I think that's the expectation here, that he would step down from the court at the end of the term, when the court is finished handing down decisions in either late June or early July.
All right, Pete, I'll ask you to stand by. I want to go to our Capitol Hill reporter, Garrett Haake. Garrett, as Pete noted, there's been some pressure, certainly from Democrats, for this decision to come down well before the midterms. Has this word even begun to circulate on the Hill, and what are the expectations going forward?
Well, members of Congress are out this week, Lester, but I can assure you when they come back next week, this will be topic number one. Look, this will be a bitter confirmation fight, almost for certain, regardless of who President Biden chooses to nominate. Remember, in 2017, Senate Republicans changed the rules for Supreme Court justices, saying that they could be confirmed with a bare majority of 51 votes. The last 3 justices, all nominated and confirmed during President Trump's tenure, had 54, 52, and 50 votes between the three of them. Now with Senate Democrats controlling just 50 votes in this chamber, every single vote will be critical. Confirmation hearings will be critical, and the timeline will be relatively short, as you said, to get this done before the midterms. But I expect this will be, again, the issue in the Senate side once they're back in town, and I expect a bitter confirmation fight ahead, Lester.
Yeah, will Republicans have many mechanisms, assuming all the Democrats stay together, will Republicans have many mechanisms to slow this bus down, if not stop it?
Absolutely. I mean, we've seen delaying tactics used before by the minority to try to slow the process down. Again, if all 50 Senate Democrats stay together, there won't be anything Republicans can do to stop it. But you look at somebody like Joe Manchin, who voted in favor of, I believe, all three of President Trump's Supreme Court nominations. Perhaps conservatives might look at him as someone they could peel off. But we also know delaying tactics only work so well. Democrats tried to slow the Amy Coney Barrett nomination down and lead up to the last election, and that was a record-breaking confirmation just 30 days from nomination to confirmation.
All right, Garrett, thank you. I'll ask you to stand by as well. I want to go to NBC News White House correspondent Peter Alexander. Peter, this would set up the president to be able to fulfill a campaign promise, and that's to nominate a black justice.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Lester. No formal comment from the White House at this time, but as you note, that is one of the headlines that we'll certainly be refocusing on over the course of the next several days and weeks, was the president's commitment as a candidate that he would nominate the first African-American justice to the Supreme Court. It's likely he would also be looking for a younger justice. Each of the last 7 justices selected were under the age of 55 when they were picked. And for the president, this is a potential opportunity to really put some legacy, his legacy, into the law as it relates to the court. Obviously, the balance still 6-3 in favor of the conservatives. The next oldest justice right now is Justice Clarence Thomas, who is 73 years old. But were this to play out over the course of the next several weeks, the president would be helped by the fact that his chief of staff is Ron Klain. Klain has been playing a pivotal role in terms of these confirmations for Democratic administrations over the course of the last 3 decades. He worked side by side in the counsel's office here at the White House under President Clinton for the selection of Ruth Bader Ginsburg several decades ago. And it is the Ginsburg nomination and her death in the last couple of years that really has been a provider of PTSD for many Democrats. The fear that Justice Breyer may stay on the court until there was no longer a Democrat in office. The concern being that by having done that, Justice Ginsburg allowed for Donald Trump to nominate Amy Coney Barrett for that role that she now serves on the court at this time. But the White House had pushed back initially against those calls for pressuring Breyer, saying that it would politically effectively undermine the court and was not the way to go. So this is news that will be welcomed by the White House, and at this point still no formal comment from them about any plans going forward.
All right, Peter, thank you. And for me to just quickly clarify, the president made the commitment to nominate an African-American woman as a justice in the Supreme Court. I want to go now to the phone. Former federal prosecutor and NBC News analyst Chuck Rosenberg joins us. Chuck, kind of set up where we go from here.
Sure, Lester. An interesting development, but not terribly surprising. If Justice Breyer retires and is replaced by a selection by President Biden, the overall sort of ideological split on the court will not change one iota. It is generally speaking, a 6-3 conservative majority court. The liberal wing, of which Justice Breyer is an important part, shrunk with the passing of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. If he retires and he is replaced, it will still be a 6-3 split on the Supreme Court.
Chuck, has the process of nominating and confirming, has that process changed forever over the last few years as to how it works and the political wins?
I think it has, Lester. I think that's an excellent question. Just on my own, I've been looking at past confirmation hearings. I mean, if you go back many years, many decades, a lot of the justices were elected by, or confirmed, I should say, by significant majorities with support from both parties. And I hate to say it, and I hope I'm wrong, but that seems very much to be a thing of the past. We have a closely divided Senate, 50-50 right now, with the Vice President of the United States perhaps casting a tie-breaking vote, as is her constitutional duty and obligation. I wouldn't be surprised to see a vote right at that margin, Lester, and I imagine also acrimonious hearings for anybody that President Biden nominates to replace Justice Breyer.
Chuck Rosenberg, thank you. Let me go back to Garrett Haake on the Hill. Garrett, I kind of have to assume that the Senate has been playing, members of Democrats and Republicans have been playing kind of a what-if game on this for some time.
That's absolutely right, Lester. And, he mentioned Ketanji Brown Jackson. This is a federal judge who was nominated to fill the seat vacated by Merrick Garland when he became Attorney General. I think that's one of the names that's been most bandied about. I remember, I think it was back in the South Carolina primary quite some time ago that then candidate Biden made this promise to nominate an African-American woman to the Supreme Court should the opportunity present itself. The federal judiciary has only so many people who fit that description. And so I think we're operating from a relatively short list. It'll be incumbent on the Judiciary Committee, that's led by Illinois Senator Dick Durbin, to move quickly on confirmation hearings. We saw a little bit of this over the last couple weeks where a single member of the Senate being out for a time period with COVID, even a minor infection, can stop Senate Democrats from doing any of the business they need to do on narrow majorities. So speed will be of the essence here once a nomination is made.
Garrett Haake, thank you. We will have much more on this breaking news, the retirement of Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer, tonight on Nightly News. I'm Lester Holt, NBC News, New York. Good day.